Good. Delighted that Professor Stephen Bevan was able to join us. And he's now going to talk, emphasising, I think, the aspect of the report in relation to employment and the workplace.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I'm really sorry for being late. As I was sitting on my 45-minute taxi ride from Euston, I was thinking, I'm really pleased stress is not in the International Classification of Diseases, but this is not what I'm experiencing at the moment. It's something else. Anyway, I did make it, so thank you very much for inviting me. Well, first thing to say is we really welcome this report, and we really welcome that you've found space in it to put a whole section in about work, because that's really important. Work is a really important part of people's lives, and it's also, in many cases, a massive source of fulfilment and satisfaction and happiness. And I think it's really important we don't get caught up in this frenzy to think about work as being a toxic place, because although toxic workplaces do exist, for the most part we know that good quality jobs are good for people's health. Now the report itself contains lots of the really good data about mental health in the working age population and in workplaces, so I'm not going to repeat all that. What I would say is the fact that we do have an increasingly good set of data about health of the working age population, particularly their mental health, I think is a sign of progress. The fact we're able to map the problem, describe it, quantify it and so on, and point it at people who really need to know about it, I think is great. Those of you who read the OECD's report looking at mental health and work in the UK, it was launched at the Work Foundation actually in February this year, will also know that their reflection on UK practice is that we're really good at data, really good at policy, we're not so good at translating that policy into sustained good practice. And so, you know, that again is something that I think is really important to emphasise, and I think it's something that comes out in this report. So, rather than go through lots of really worrying statistics about the state of the mental health of the workforce, I just want to pick out three things. I will preface it with one statistic though, if that's okay, for those empiricists in the room, that we know from the research that about 30% of people, working people in the UK, say they would never work with someone who's got a mental health problem. So it's worth just remembering that, because you know the issue of stigma is something which of course is a wider societal issue, but it's still a workplace issue, and it's still something that means many people fear disclosing their condition to their colleagues, to their managers and so on, and that's something that I think sits in the background of all this. But I'd like to make three specific points, if that's okay, in my 4 minutes of allocated time. First is, just to remind everybody that mental illness is dynamic and individual. We need to recognise that both work and non-work related factors affect mental health at different times and at different times in people's life cycle. So we're not trying to deal here with a stable thing that we can pin down. It's something that is very individual and changes over time and is affected by different things. So even things like heavy workloads or intense demands of work can be positive influences on our mental health if challenges outside work become overwhelming. And that is the case for some people. So it's not right to think about workplace stress in the same way as we think about lead in the atmosphere, that certain parts per million will automatically make people ill. You know, work can be a very invigorating experience, and therefore we need to give more people access to good quality jobs and psychologically healthy workplaces. So individual resilience to pressure, uncertainty, ambiguity is incredibly variable. And what I think this report helps us think about is what employers can do to help people to cope with uncertainty and variability in their working environment. What we also should guard against is the sort of inoculation model of resilience. The notion that if we put people through sheep dip resilience training, then we can do whatever we like to them because they're suddenly more resilient. Okay, so resilience is not an inoculation. Let's make sure we don't fall into that trap. It's also important to recognise that our goal should be sustained work for people. So work programme, health and work service, all these different initiatives can't just be judged on whether or not people fall over the finish line and get into a job and then we leave them alone. People are at high risk of relapse in some circumstances, and we need to make sure that sustained quality employment is what we're aiming for. The second point I'd like to make is that we need to make sure that all parts of the system systematically regard work as a clinical outcome of treatment. It's really, really important. We still have situations where GPs are catastrophising or medicalising work issues and in an unhelpful way. Or where people in secondary care don't even think about what the work status or aspirations are of people presenting with a mental health problem. And the Schizophrenia Commission, for example, showed that about 8% of people with schizophrenia are in employment. And our study at the Work Foundation on schizophrenia employment found that, that if you're in paid employment with a severe mental illness, you're 5 times more likely to be in functional remission. So actually, there are strong therapeutic benefits for people with mental illness to be in good quality, hopefully paid and competitive employment. And therefore, we think that part of the process here is we're getting all parts of the system to prioritise work as an outcome. And at the moment, not all parts of the system do. We are now just about able to measure the employment status of people down to CCG level, but it's taken a while to get there. And we're still not able to do that for other conditions which are comorbid with mental illness, such as musculoskeletal conditions. So that's something that I think we need to really watch out for. I'm also really pleased the report puts a lot of emphasis on access to work as a scheme, because as many people have said, it's one of the government's best kept secrets, and they do great stuff in terms of helping small employers particularly make adjustments for people with mental health problems. I think we need to focus on that. The third and final point comes back to my main thing, which is about good work. Good work is really central. There's lots of backsnapping at the moment about how unemployment has gone down, employment's gone up. 40% of the new jobs created are self-employed jobs for people earning less than $13,000 a year. There's still lots of insecurity in the labour market. There's still people in precarious employment or casualised work. Insecurity is still a big issue. So look beneath the headlines and you'll see a lot of people in jobs for which they're perhaps overqualified or their skills are being underutilised. The quality of work is something that still needs to be at the centre of the political debate, because we know that good job quality has strong psychosocial benefits for people, and that we need to give people as much access to that as possible. And employers need to play their part as well. But it's clear that part of the debate running up to the next election will not just be about more jobs, but better jobs. And I think we need to break away from this notion that in a recession or in a depressed economy, any job is a good job. And that's certainly the case when we think about the mental health of the workforce. And it seems to me that as we're moving still more into a knowledge-based economy, the psychosocial health of our workforce is not just about health, it's not just about social inclusion, both of which are really important, it's also about competitiveness. And unless we put all those different drivers together, we're not going to be able to make a coherent argument for policymakers to take this seriously. So I welcome the contribution of this report, and particularly its emphasis on work. Thank you.